Hey guys, welcome back to the Big Intentions podcast. I'm your host, Iralyn. So excited to be back. It was kind of short. I just recorded not long ago, but I'm back. It's Thursday and the episode is live. We're good. We're here. We are back on our routine, traveling through it off. We just got to get better at prepping for future episodes. So, welcome. If you're new here, this is the Big Intentions Pod. It's all about becoming the highest version of yourself. It's a great time over here. Lots of lessons to learn, lots of things going on. So, let's just get into some housekeeping things. If you are new here, you can follow the podcast on Spotify or Apple, leave a 5-star rating, all the things. That's perfect. And if you're more of a visual girly on YouTube, like, comment, subscribe. Please interact with the episodes. That really helps out the podcast, helps it grow. So that's great. That's kind of some housekeeping things to get out of the way. And we can just jump right into the episode with our first segment, which is Living Out Loud. So this week truly has flown by. I love when a week flies by. Not a huge weekday girly, but anyways, want to apologize for last week's episode going up a little bit later. That's not going to happen. That's not a regular thing. Just had a huge life event happen. So, was really in the moment for that, which was good. And I'm back, baby. We're back on the pod. It feels good. And I didn't miss an episode. So it's not like anything really happened. You guys aren't missing out on my life. I know you're like so curious what I've been up to. But anyways, yeah, so basically not a ton to catch you up on since I just recorded not long ago. But I do want to say that it was 70 degrees a couple mornings this week in Texas, and that is literally such a breath of fresh air, and I really cannot contain my excitement. It's truly fall. Like, y'all know I prematurely celebrate fall, but it's fine. Hence me wearing this sweater right now. You know what I mean? But it's fine. We're all here for fall. We can still enjoy the summer days, but while also looking forward to fall. Two things can exist at once. So, anyways, so excited for fall and all of the fall festivities that come with that. I don't feel like there's a ton of fall energy in Texas until like literally November, like Thanksgiving, but it's fine. Also, huge news. Speaking of Thanksgiving, Jack Harlow just announced his Kentucky tour, and there's no place like home. I think that's what it's called. And I'm literally, I'm trying to get on that pre-sale, registered. I've got people texting me about it. I got my mom signed up. Because everybody knows when Jack Harlow announces something big, like I'm the first to know. Like I'm literally on his like text chain of like I sign up for his announcements. Like I really, if he had any kind of newsletter, I would subscribe to it. You know what I mean? Huge fan. Like my notifications are on for Jack Harlow things. So that's kind of like the most relevant thing I can update you guys on. But looking forward, I have lots of upcoming trips and I'm so excited for them. But I really want to focus on like getting right back into routine like when I get back, and also when I'm on the trips, like still focusing on my routine, because I think the last trip I went on, I don't know if it's just like when I go to Kentucky or if it's just when I go on a trip in general, but I totally just see it as a chance to neglect all habits and routines and really don't think that's good. I think if it's truly a good habit and routine, it would carry into my trips and things. So really get better at kind of like strengthening those habits and routines no matter where I'm at, no matter the location. So yeah, I have basically one content update for you guys, which is that I'm reading A Simple Wild, which I desperately need to finish this book. Like I really just want to take a whole day this weekend and like really get after it, because I need to start my August book club pick, which is my pick, and I have the physical book, so like I don't have to wait for it or anything like at the library, so that's good. But like I need to read that book because I'm pretty sure all my friends are almost all the way through it, and it's halfway through August, and we needed to get on it. So my August book pick, by the way, is Carrie Soto is Back, and it's like a tennis vibe, and the US Open is coming up, so I feel like we can really embrace it and get after it. So that's kind of my content updates for you guys. And we'll just move right into intentional living, which is really to get back into reading this weekend. I really just want to soak up some sun, summer energy, lay by the pool, maybe read if it's not like extremely hot. I don't know, it might be really hot again. But those 70s, oh my gosh, that was literally the best feeling in the mornings. Like I could actually breathe. Last night, it's the evening time, take my dog out, I can breathe. And you guys, you wouldn't think that it would be that big of a difference here in Texas. The heat is like, oh yeah, it's 100. No, you literally cannot breathe. Like it's a whole thing. It's so annoying. So you're lucky if you're in the 80 or even 90-degree weather on the regular because 100s is no joke. So let's move right on into our words to live by. And I found this on the We the Urban Instagram, but it was like another creator who had created this artwork. But basically, the quote goes, "The only way to have more is to stop holding on to less." And so this is going to kind of be the basis of our theme today, which you can tell by the podcast title, High Standards, Low Expectations. And I've said this for so long. I really probably started saying this in like college when I was having like really crappy dating experiences, and like that's literally the trope of every college to mid 20s girly. I feel like everyone always has like, oh, the craziest dating. But I'm not going that far as to say that. But I'm just saying that this motto was in my head from like high or not high school. Like college, I probably like came to this realization. But anyway, so yes, a lot of people, let's just get into the topic because I want to talk about the relationship side of standards too, but that's not like the whole focus of the episode. It's just standards in general, like that you apply to your life. But high standards, low expectations. And, at first it seems like having high standards and low expectations, those really don't sound like those things can coexist. But I'll get into it in today's podcast episode about how having both make for a perfect balance and lead you to becoming self sufficient and really whole on your own. And the quote specifically speaks to the standards part of the topic in today's episode. So let's just dive into having high standards. What does that mean? What are standards? How to set high standards, how to raise your standards, and what like standards that I have in place in my life. So that is kind of what we're going to be talking about today. So high standards. You really hear this mostly in terms of dating, but I just kind of want to broaden that spectrum and talk about standards in terms of like life, period. So, having high standards means you don't settle for anything less than what you truly desire. Standards are a personal set of norms of acceptable and unacceptable behaviors. So these standards include healthy boundaries, your values, your principles, things that you actively are implementing in your life and applying to different people or situations that come up in your life. And so standards apply to all aspects of our lives. And like I was saying, initially, my mind automatically goes to kind of like those romantic relationships or people, that those encounters that you have in your life. I think especially our society loves to talk about like dating and stuff. So, and if you're in a season of like singleness or you're dating, then I think obviously that kind of content's going to find you more. And so like having high standards is typically something that you hear about in that area. But and I think that having high standards in that area is especially crucial because I'll get into this later, but like the people that you date is a reflection of you and your standards. So obviously it's really important like who you surround yourself with, and standards, I feel like standards typically, you're applying that to like people in your life, like standards that you have for people that you allow yourself to interact with. But I think standards can just be across the board. It's just a level of quality. So that could be literally applied to anything. So standards are used as a basis for what we believe we are worthy of and deserving of. So the opposite of standards are expectations. And so it's important to understand the difference, because at one point I definitely had these confused and was using standards and expectations like interchangeably. And even if you do know the difference, it is easy to like slip in between the two, because expectations are having unrealistic well, okay, let me back up, because so I feel like I say I have high standards, but sometimes that would bleed into having unrealistic expectations for people that I put onto people and projected onto people. And that could be really detrimental to your relationships and your own mental well being, is if you have all these expectations and you're constantly being let down. And it's just like this negative cycle, and you feel like no one's there for you, no one's showing up for you. And so that's why I think it's so important to define the difference between the standard and an expectation. So here's what expectation is. An expectation is a strong belief that something is going to happen, or someone or something will achieve a certain goal. And placing expectations on ourselves, people, or things, we're putting pressure on our external reality to conform to our own self and our beliefs and wants. And so I think a prime example of like a standard versus an expectation. So, personal example here, I love to celebrate. So, I love to extravagantly display a celebration. Like, I want the balloons, I want the cake, I want the flowers, I want the party favors, I want the photo shoot for the special event. Like, I want to do it up. I want it to be so done up. And that's like personally my standard. Like, if I'm having a huge celebration, like, it's going to be a huge celebration, and it's fine to have that standard. But here is where it kind of gets tricky, is so if I like this grandeur kind of celebration or whatever, it would be, if I have an expectation, that I am placing out into the world, into the universe, that I really want someone to, like, oh, I wish someone would do this and celebrate me this way and surprise me or whatever. That's kind of me placing and putting and pressuring the idea of this thing happening and putting it on somebody else. And so by placing this expectation on someone else, it can create a negative kind of tension on the friendship or the relationship. And so having high standards, obviously you want to have high standards because that raises your quality of life. Like, I'm not settling for less, but for me to place that expectation on someone else to do this thing for me, maybe it's one thing if you don't even communicate it, you just like expect people, like, hence expectations, you just expect somebody to know this thing about you and do this thing for you. That's not fair, and that's not realistic. And so I think it's really important to communicate, your standards, and see how you can kind of like recruit somebody to help out, maybe do these types of things. But really, one key to having high standards is communication, because otherwise you're just placing expectations on people and you're going to get let down at the end of the day. Not saying that people aren't willing to help you or want to do things for you, but like, if you just are always placing expectations on other people based on your own wants and needs, placing these expectations on your external reality, like, time and time again, you're going to get let down. You're going to lose faith in humanity. And it's like, not to say that people aren't going to do these things for you and do these nice grand gestures, like, they will. But I think one thing, it's important to communicate, because maybe someone doesn't even know that you're that kind of person that likes that kind of thing. And also, you just have to communicate. Like, that's literally the key to life and to everything, is communication. And so, not being like, obviously you want to do it in like a respectful way, but like communicating it in a way that's like, something that really means a lot to me is celebrating things. So this is how I like to celebrate things. This is what makes me feel celebrated and good. and sharing it in like a positive way rather than like, you have to do this thing for me because that's my standard. Like, there's two totally different tones that are going on there. And so I think it's important to be cognizant of like how that you communicate this thing to people as well. So, and speaking from experience, like, okay, one thing that might be my standard is like the person that I'm dating, buys me flowers. Okay. There are like so many different ways to communicate that, but demanding that a man buy you flowers, like, that's probably not gonna like jive well. But if you're like, you know what, it really means so much to me to have fresh flowers delivered by somebody I love. And like, just the way that you present it, like, let me tell you, you're gonna get a lot more out of that than you are just like demanding things of people. And I've made the mistake before. It's like, oh, shouldn't they just know that I like this thing? It's like, no, you pretty much have to tell a man like exactly what you want, exactly how you like things. And like, they'll get the gist. But like, you really cannot just like blindly trust that everybody is going to know what you want or like know what the standard is. And I'm not saying that you need to communicate to people like the bare minimum. Like, you don't have to tell somebody, I like whenever you text me back. Like, obviously, like, it's not really talking about that. And so I don't like want to relate the standards thing like all to relationship type of things, but I just think that's where your mind like kind of naturally like gravitates towards that kind of standards, relationships for people I date, whatever. So that's just kind of like a little anecdote on that. So now that we've kind of cleared up the difference, let's talk about how to raise your standards and what my standards for different areas of my life are. So by raising your standards, you are increasing and enhancing your quality of life. So obviously, this can apply to all aspects of your life. And so in terms of like people in your life. So let's just categorize this as like friendships and relationships. So this idea and topic has been coming up a lot lately, I feel like, in my life with people. Like, we're just talking about this concept, which is the person that you are romantically involved with, or even like friends who you surround yourself with. Those people are a direct reflection of you. And so those people reflect your standards. Like, that's the kind of people that you're allowing in your life that reflects your standards for those people. And also, the way that you let people treat you, I mean, honestly, it says more about you than it says about this person. Like, if somebody is treating you poorly and you're just like keeping this person around in your life, like, honestly, that says less about them being a crappy person, and it says more about you and your standards and your level of tolerance for such unnecessary, like, toxic energy, honestly. And so this is why you have to raise your standards, is because you're one that's increasing your quality of life, but also in terms of relationships and people in your life, like, by you associating with certain types of people, like, that's just a direct reflection of you. And so, like, me and Spencer have talked about this before, but it's like the idea that we want to show up as our best selves, yes, for ourselves, but also for each other in this partnership, because the way that I show up in the world and interact with the world is a reflection of him, and same for him. Like, even as simple as like the way that I appear and look and like I keep up with my hygiene, my grooming, the way that I dress, whatever, like, that's how I present myself to the world. And so, like, if we're out together, the people that you're with, you're obviously associating these people, like, they're together, they're a reflection of each other. This is huge too. It's like, okay, the way that you talk about your partner says a lot about you. And this concept has come up in lots of different ways. But like, the way, okay, if you're complaining about your partner, or you're complaining about, your friend, that says more about you than it does the person you're complaining about, because you're tolerating whatever said behavior, if it's negative or whatever. Or if you're talking positively about them, it says more about them. And so there was this concept recently that was talking about the way that you talk about yourself, the way that you talk to others is actually a reflection of how you think about yourself. So if you're like hyping people up, then you're hyping yourself up. Like if you are putting out good into the world and like the way that you view other people is like in a positive light, that's a reflection of how you feel about yourself. And so I think that is like really interesting, like the way that you talk about your friends or talk about anybody in your life is really you just like straight up like analyzing yourself and how you feel about yourself. So that's one thing to keep in mind. So my standard for relationships or friendships or people like in my life, number one, it's like we have mutual respect for one another. So that's one thing. I want the people in my life, I want those people to be people who make me better, make me, challenge me to do better and do more and be better, be the highest version of myself. And I really want these people to make a more positive impact on my life. And so I'm not really a fan of the negative Nancy's. It's just not my prerogative to listen to people complain. Like some people can just really suck all of your energy and really drain you. And I find myself associating with these type of people less and less. And I just have a standard for people in my life to be people who are constantly like showing up for me, not making like everything about them. Like, sometimes you're hanging out with somebody and it's like, bro, did you even ask me one question about me? Like, I don't think so. And so I think it's important to, obviously, there's like ebbs and flows when like some friends are like going through something and you're not. And like, that's different. But like, you ultimately, like, my standard for people is respect. We show up for one another. Like friends, you choose your friends. Like these should be like light feeling. Like you should have positive feelings about your friends. You know what I mean? And so I think that's important to kind of view your standards around the people that you surround yourself with, because that ultimately is a direct reflection of you. And so let's talk about how to raise your standards, because this is really important. So, the number one question you have to ask yourself is, what do you believe about yourself? Because your beliefs make up your identity, and your beliefs impact like every single part of your life and down to the choices that you make, and then ultimately your identity, your destiny. And I did this whole podcast episode on this like not long ago, and I can link that in the show notes below so you can like dive deep into beliefs and limiting beliefs. But that's kind of goes into the second question that you have to consider when you're trying to raise your standards, and that is breaking your limiting beliefs. So identifying your limiting beliefs, identifying, what you tell yourself is holding you back, because really these hypothetical things that are holding you back, that's not actually what's holding you back. It's you that's holding you back, and you have to take control of your life and eradicate these limiting beliefs. Like you, for whatever reason, developed these at some point in your life, and you really have to get to the root cause of like why you believe this limiting belief and eradicating it and not allowing it to hold you back, because you are in control of your life. And if you want to become the highest version of yourself, increase the quality of your life, you're going to have to raise your standards. And that means really coming down to the core of what you believe about yourself, what you're capable of, dreaming these big dreams for yourself, and breaking any limiting beliefs that are holding you back. And so those are kind of things that you have to look at when you're raising your standards. And I think it's good to just kind of evaluate your standards like periodically. We're always changing and evolving as people. We go through all these different experiences that we learn things from. And so really, the standards that you had 3 months ago, a year ago, 2 years ago, those are totally different standards than you might have now. And like definitely for me, in terms of like dating, in terms of like health and wellness, the standards I set for myself now in those areas, it's like totally different. Like, and so another area of, life, health and wellness, that's like a huge area where I definitely raised my standards recently. And it's like, you can't complain about something and say you should do something, you want to do something. It's like, should you or you must? And this is like a whole concept I was reading about on the Tony Robbins, like his website, about raising your standards. And it's like, you have all these things you should do. Okay, why are you not doing these things? Just raise your standards and really get down to the root cause of like why you haven't done these things and like what you can do to make these things happen. So, for example, the health and wellness, it really just came down to implementing a consistent routine, putting in the work, doing these little habits and routines daily that really ultimately like lead you to this highest version of yourself, lead you to your goals or your dreams. And so for me, I really wanted to prioritize, I want to live a long, healthy life. I want to feel good. I want to be confident in the body that I have. And like, I really haven't had much of a confidence issue ever. That just that's blind confidence here. And so like, that's great. But it was like, you don't really realize sometimes if you're like super confident, then sometimes you just like don't even realize these things about yourself. And you're like looking back one day and I'm like, I just wasn't healthy. Like it just wasn't living an active lifestyle at all. And so really making that a priority and saying, okay, every day I want to show up for myself and implement these things that will allow me to live a healthier lifestyle, to live a long lifestyle. And so my limiting belief maybe was that I wasn't capable, I didn't have the discipline. And it's like, well, you do because you've showed that in other areas of your life. It's just really having the determination to eradicate those limiting beliefs and be like, I'm showing up for myself every single day and then eventually seeing the progress. And so if that means maybe not indulging all the time and it means really prioritizing movement and activity, and if it means prioritizing like whatever it is for your specific area in your life where you want to raise your standards, that's really key to doing so. So there's probably like so many other areas obviously of your life that where you want to raise your standards, but I kind of just wanted to talk mainly about people, relationships, friendships, and like my health and wellness. And there's so many other areas where I'm like, okay, yeah, I actually do want to raise the bar in this area because like I know I'm capable of so much more. And honestly, I was thinking about this today. Like, I'm 24. I need to be risky, like, so risky during this time period because, like, when else am I going to be this risky? And so I think risk is associated with raising your standards because obviously the bar is low in most areas of like the average, like, probably American or whatever. Like, honestly, it's like not everyone is an entrepreneur, a CEO, or whatever. And so it's like if you have high standards for yourself, if you are just work towards it, like I talked about in last week's episode, if you put in the work, your passions follow. Like if you're putting in the work and raising your standards, eventually somebody's going to meet those standards. You're going to raise the bar. You're going to start surrounding yourself with those high level individuals. You're going to start one to become like that, and that's going to be a reflection of you. And so that's basically all I have on today's podcast episode about raising your standards and having low expectations. And kind of like the whole low expectations thing is basically just not placing unrealistic expectations on other people. But I think it's really important to raise your standards, communicate your standards, and I would love to know how you guys are raising your standards in your life. Like what standards are you going to raise, and how are you enhancing your quality of life, becoming the highest version of yourself? So that's all I have for you guys today. Thanks so much for listening or watching today's podcast episode. You can find me on Instagram at Iralyn12, and like, subscribe, comment on the YouTube, leave me a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify, wherever you're listening to this. And thanks so much for watching or listening today, guys. Thanks. Love you. Bye.